Vladimir Putin has claimed victory in Russia's presidential election, handing him another 6 years in power.
It was a long speech, over 2 hours. But Vladimir Putin kept the fighting talk for the start.
Breaking news overnight, Putin's new threat, saying he's ready to use nuclear weapons after Ukraine's massive drone strike on Russia.
This will be one step away from a full-fledged World War III.
Putin wins election for the 5th consecutive time and has threatened for the World War, while China celebrated Putin's victory. Is it the face of dictatorship under the cover of democracy? What U.S. thinks of this election as U.S. is also going through serious situations in its own country. Putin now is more confident as he is blamed to kill all his opponents and win the election. What Putin replies on it, and how did he manage to respond to ongoing protest against him? So hello viewers, welcome back to our channel GeoKit, your daily guide to geopolitical affairs. If you are new to the channel and enjoy learning about geopolitics and technological innovations, you will find our videos helpful. In this video, we will discuss about Russia's elections, Putin's strategies, the West's reaction on this election, and Putin's diplomatic ties with China. Watch the video until the end to know how Putin is planning to remain in power till 2036. So without any delay, let's get started. Russian President Vladimir Putin won the presidential election as he secured nearly 88% of the votes amid symbolic noon protest at polling stations. Putin, who rose to power in 1999, would overtake Joseph Stalin and become Russia's longest-serving leader after securing the new 6-year term. According to Russia's Central Election Commission, nearly a quarter of the votes have been counted, and Putin leading the race with 87.9%. Exit polls earlier showed similar trends, with the head of state expected to win the election with 87.8%. Putin's opponent from the Communist Party, Nikolai Kharitonov, is expected to come at second position with 4.7%. Vladislav Davankov of the New People Party on third position with 3.6% votes, and Leonid Slutsky of the Liberal Democrats at the fourth position with securing 2.5% votes. According to CNN, lines at some polling stations in Russia grew suddenly at around 12 p.m. local time Sunday, the hour at which supporters of the deceased opposition leader Alexei Navalny called on people to turn out collectively as a show of opposition support. Police allowed people in batches through the gates to pass through security, with metal detectors and bags being checked inside the building. Sunday marks the third and final day of voting, with Russian President Vladimir Putin almost certain to win a 5th term in office. As per media reports, voting took place across the country's 11 time zones, from the far eastern regions near Alaska to the western exclave. In 2020, Putin made some constitutional changes which would secure him for 2030 elections as well. Putin's re-election would extend his rule until at least 2030, and he would then be able to run again and potentially stay in power until 2036, which would see him secure his place as Russia's longest-serving ruler since Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin. But how Putin came in power first and how he does strategize to remain in power every time. For Putin, who is a former KGB lieutenant colonel who first rose to power in 1999, the result is intended to underscore to the West that its leaders will have to estimate with an reassured Russia, whether in war or in peace, for many more years to come. Well, Putin was first nominated as acting president when former Russian President Boris Yeltsin resigned. He then won his first presidential election in March 2000 and a second term in 2004. After 2 times as president, Putin switched back to being prime minister in 2008 to outwit a constitutional ban on holding more than 2 consecutive terms as head of state. But he returned to the presidency in 2012 and won a 4th term in 2018. Shortly after the last polls closed on Sunday, early returns pointed to the conclusion everyone expected: that Putin would extend his nearly quarter-century rule for 6 more years. In a post-election news conference, Putin cast the outcome as a justification of his decision to fight back against the West and invade Ukraine. Putin's victory was never in doubt, as his critics are mostly in jail, in exile, or dead, while public criticism of his leadership has been silent. The Russian leader's most prominent rival, Alexei Navalny, died in an Arctic prison last month, and Putin is blamed for his death. On Sunday, thousands of Putin's opponents staged a protest against him. Supporters of Navalny had called on Russians to come out to a noon against Putin protest. There was no independent tally of how many of Russia's 114 million voters took part in the opposition demonstrations, amid tight security involving tens of thousands of police and security officials. Journalists saw an increase in the flow of voters, especially younger people, at noon at polling stations in Moscow. Some said they were protesting, though there were few outward signs to distinguish them from ordinary voters. At least 74 people were arrested on Sunday across Russia. Over the previous 2 days, there were scattered incidents of protest as some Russians set fire to voting booths or poured green dye into ballot boxes. Opponents posted some pictures of ballots spoiled with slogans insulting Putin. But Navalny's death has left the opposition deprived of its most formidable leader, and other major opposition figures are abroad, in jail or dead. At his press conference, Putin referred to Navalny by name for the first time since his death, saying he had supported a proposal to release him in exchange for prisoners held in Western countries. White House's National Security Council spokesperson said that the elections are obviously not free nor fair, given reference that how Mr. Putin has imprisoned political opponents and prevented others from running against him. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said, "This election fraud has no legitimacy and cannot have any." Zelensky said this because the election came more than 2 years after Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which is Europe's deadliest conflict since World War II. On Zelensky's comments, Putin replied that Russia might need to create a buffer zone inside Ukraine to prevent such attacks in future, and has strictly warned to the NATO alliances and France for sending troops in Russia. As he warned about the World War III. Yes, World War III, Vladimir Putin warned the West that a direct conflict between Russia and NATO military alliance would mean the planet was one step away from World War III, and he further said that "I think hardly anyone is interested in this and would want such a scenario." Putin said that though, NATO military personnel were present already in Ukraine, saying that Russia had picked up both English and French being spoken on the battlefield, and there is nothing good in this, first of all for them because they are dying there and in large numbers. The United States, Germany, the United Kingdom, and other nations have said the vote was neither free nor fair due to the imprisonment of political opponents and censorship. Before we proceed further, discussing what did Putin reply to US and how it's strengthening its diplomatic ties with China. I'd like to hear from you. Are you finding this video informative? Feel free to share your thoughts and questions in the comment section below. And if you're finding it helpful, please consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Your support means a lot to us and helps us reach a wider audience and the content that you'll love. Let's continue this journey together. After US's statement, Putin told his supporters in a victory speech in Moscow that he would prioritize resolving tasks associated with what he called Russia's special military operation in Ukraine and would strengthen the Russian military. Putin said in his address that no matter who or how much they want to intimidate us, no matter how much they try to suppress us, but on our will and our consciousness, no one has ever succeeded in anything like this in history. It has not worked till now and will never work in the future. After his powerful statements, his supporters chanted with the name of Putin and Russia after he had delivered his acceptance speech. Putin told reporters he regarded Russia's election as democratic and said the Navalny had inspired protest against him, had no effect on the election's outcome. When asked by NBC whether his re-election was democratically fought, Putin criticized the US political and judicial systems. Putin said that the whole world is laughing at what is happening in the United States. This is just a disaster, not a democracy. He further pointed out at 4 criminal cases against Republican candidate Donald Trump and said that is it democratic to use administrative resources to attack one of the candidates for the presidency of the US, using the judiciary among other things? Nah, do you want to know how Trump has been drained financially after 4 ongoing case hearings? We've covered this in a separate video, which you can watch after this video ends. Link is mentioned in the description. Now let's get back to the topic. The West calls Putin as a dictator and a killer. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Putin wanted to rule forever and that the vote had been unlawful. Putin portrays the war as part of a centuries-old battle with a declining West that he says humiliated Russia after the Cold War by intruding on Moscow's sphere of influence. However, support for Ukraine is tangled in US domestic politics ahead of the November presidential election. On one side, the US and Western countries have opposed the election results, while on the other hand, Chinese President Xi Jinping congratulated Putin on successful 5th consecutive win. and he said China was set to maintain close communication with Russia to promote their partnership. Putin won a record post-Soviet victory in Russia's election on Sunday, strengthening his tight hold on power. In a victory, he said Moscow had been right to stand up to the West and send its troops into Ukraine. Further, Xi Jinping said to Putin that your re-election is a full demonstration of the support of the Russian people for you, and I believe that under your leadership, Russia will certainly be able to achieve greater achievements in national development and construction. China has strengthened its ties with Russia over the past few years, even as Western criticism of the war in Ukraine has increased. The two countries declared a no-limits partnership in February 2022, when Putin visited Beijing just days before he sent thousands of troops into Ukraine. China attaches great importance to the development of China-Russia relations and stands ready to maintain close communication with Russia to promote the sustained, healthy, stable, and in-depth development of the China-Russia Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. It has been reported China and Russia are preparing several meetings between Xi and Putin this year. According to the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Lin Jian, who said that this year marks the 75th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and Russia, adding that the two heads of state would continue to maintain close exchanges. Do you think that Russia would take Russia-China diplomatic ties, would help Russian in the geopolitical stance against Ukraine war? How offensive steps Russia can take against Ukraine in future? Even now, Putin has become more powerful with the support of BRICS leadership as well. What do you think that our US sanctions are working on Russia? Or they've led a positive turn in Russia's economy? Let us know your opinions in the comments section, and don't forget to share the video and like and click on the subscribe button as well for remaining updated of the current trends of geopolitical tensions. Until the next video, stay tuned.